Perhaps there's never been a time where media literacy was more important. Unless you pay attention to the fine print, it's simply too easy to get caught up in the polarized narratives. It doesn't help that algorithms on social media is designed to look for what we'd like in the first place, implying that if this is how we obtain our political knowledge, we might be at the risk of reinforcing only our own beliefs. So for this week's GMS Focus, we're joined by Professor Kim Byung-joo of the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Without stealing your thunder, it was difficult to come up with an opening that was all-encompassing.
That was very good. Very good.
Thank you. I need the approval this Monday morning.
Absolutely. No question about it. Great opening.
All right, Dr. Kim. Last week, it was hard for us to ignore the fact that Korea's media headlines were filled with the tit-for-tat down spiral exchange between Korea and China, setting aside the international aspect of that very issue. How do you evaluate the domestic dimension, particularly the way Korea's political leaders have been handling the issue at hand?
Right. That's a very important question, I guess, at this point, because last week, as you just precisely described it, the China-Korea tension was played out as an important political material for political conflict here inside Korean domestic politics. So that raises concerns. First of all, I guess both sides, the opposition party as well as the ruling party, they have made a mistake. They have made mistakes from several people have pointed those out as in my knowledge. But anyway, what do we mean by mistakes? Both sides. First, starting with the Democratic Party, the party leader Lee Jae-myung. Two questions. Who actually initiated his meeting with the Chinese ambassador to Korea? Was it the Democratic Party that requested the meeting, or was it the Chinese embassy that initiated the meeting? I think that's an important question, and I don't have an answer to that. I looked through different sources, and I couldn't find a reliable answer about whose idea was this. Opposition party leader sitting together with the ambassador of the country that this country has having difficulties with. Who initiated the idea? That's an important question that has not been satisfactorily answered. But somehow, either way, if the opposition party initiated the meeting, that shows us the weight of this question we're dealing with. How do we deal with international relations, foreign policy issues as a domestic political issue when opposition leader comes out initiating this kind of trouble, if you will? How do we take that? Right. There's a big question there. Second dimension on this President Lee Jae-myung and Shin Ai-ming meeting was the venue where it took place. The opposition leader being at the ambassador's residence, kind of like coming to see him was not the best setting. If Chinese ambassador wanted to see the opposition leader, he should have been asked to come to the opposition party's office or building. So that's another second possible big mistake, the way it's presented to the public. So overall, the possibility that opposition party might have studied all this all together from the beginning, or maybe jointly together with the Chinese embassy, that raises a big concern in the minds of people here in Korea. So that's possible fault and responsibility, mistakes possibly made by the opposition party. Now, the ruling party. Ruling party has made a lot of different comments about how this is going bad and, criticizing China, criticizing the Democratic Party. I guess, okay, understandable and all that. But what happened at the presidential office was something pretty risky. We saw briefly a quote-unquote leak of what President said at a closed-door meeting, calling Chinese ambassador modern time Wian Sky, the infamous governor of Korea before Japanese takeover, Qing dynasty's governor of Korea, who later became the leader of, Qing the China that was falling apart right before its full collapse and everything. That quote-unquote leak, if it was orchestrated by someone in presidential office, that's very hardball, politics, playing politics domestically speaking. That's not what should happen. And intentions seem kind of make sense, like you want to really deliver a big blow and satisfy the hardcore Yoon supporters. For Yoon supporters, I know it was a great comment. It made them feel very good about what they wanted to say from the beginning.
And like you said, it was a closed-door meeting, so its intent was probably to be kept within those closed doors. But the problem is sometimes there's a way of managing being leaked out, and it becomes much more problematic.
Right. And what I'm saying is if possibly by any chance there was a leak by calculation through, based on tactical decisions, that's irresponsible thing to do, so because it could really escalate the situation overall. So on both sides, I saw kind of possibility of a strong, grave irresponsibility being played out for the purpose of playing politics domestically. So those are the concerns on this issue.
Okay, and it doesn't end with that issue, right? I think the idea of potentially weakening foreign policy goals and to get there when it's hyper-politicized, it becomes problematic. So talking about that very domestic political dimension of another international issue, of course, Japan's planned Fukushima wastewater release. What do you make of the two sides' polar opposite views on the potential release of the wastewater?
Yeah, this is an issue with some exaggeration. I'm losing my sleep over. I'm not going that far, but almost. I mean, this is potentially very, very concerning.
Sure.
And potential. I tend to get nervous sometimes when I think about this issue, particularly because of my memory of mad cow disease. I guess it was a decade and a half ago when mad cow disease protests took place on the streets of Seoul. And whether you like it or not, at the end of the day, everybody now has been enjoying US beef for quite some time and in great quantities. And all these arguments that were presented were not materialized. But my memory of its intensity of the protest and the rhetorics and everything that was being raised still haunts me, thinking about a possibility of damaging relationship with the key allies in a way. I don't think it happened that negatively with regard to Korea's relationship with the United States, luckily. But I really don't want to see this being repeated. And then I sense there is such a possibility that being repeated for Fukushima water release issue as well. Luckily, fortunately, so far what I observe is just fine progress of the issue. I don't think there is a great reason to be that much concerned or losing my sleep over it yet. And so I'm glad to see it here. But really what I sincerely hope for is not to see the repetition of mad cow disease case, redux of it, because there are so many different reasons. But one of many reasons could be I can think of is the future of Korea's fishery industry, fishery and seafood and so on, and the harm it could cause to the well-being of the Korean people. Here. Basically, what I'm mindful of, and what I hope that Korean public will be mindful of, is openness of mind. We don't want to. We should not say 100% on any side of this argument. And what I really think what we need is open-mindedness about the importance of science and the expert views, and then global views, global consensus, what the global experts are talking about this altogether. And a few days ago, I met some of my former students who are professional, active in corporate world, complaining that the Korean government is not coming out forcefully enough to counter possible accusations, what they call unscientific accusations, raising unnecessary fears about the water release and everything. And I told them, I believe what Korean government is doing right now is the right thing to do. And Korean government is saying, let's look at the data. Let's wait and see and look at the data as they become more and more available. And I'm telling them it's being mindful of mad cow disease. Korean government should not force ahead with any kind of predetermined position. Rather, as it emphasizes the importance of science, it should continue to draw public attention to the science and facts and the data. So, but the thing is, we know, even though the overall situation so far has been quite relatively satisfactory, the way I see it, but I know there are groups and people out there who want to amplify this issue as much as they can going forward. So this remains as an issue of possible great concern in my mind.
Because it's tricky dealing with the public's fear. How do you deter and manage excessive fear? I wish it was really just simple to say rely on scientific data. If the part of the public start to question the transparency of the data, it becomes a complicated, this tug of war. Like you said, I think waiting and looking for facts, cross-checking seems to be all important. We just interviewed a nuclear physicist last Friday on this topic, and he was leaning towards definitely one side of the argument, saying that the level of tritium found in the treated wastewater in Fukushima was safe. Now, in this week's Friday interview, we want to get the polar opposite of that end. Are there scientists out there who believe that there's perhaps not enough data so far to deem that it's safe? So
what we need is continuous open discussion about this among the experts. And also, when I say international perspective of it, we should also reasonably respect what Japanese people feel about it. It's their water to begin with. They're the people who will be affected the most. And we understand there is a ocean current that goes up north. And reaction from Alaska, Canada, United States should be counted perhaps as more important reaction because they're the ones who's supposed to be affected first before us and everything. So we don't want to go out of our way saying Koreans just shouting and crying and all that kind of stuff. We have to watch out what happens to other countries, those people who take care of their lives on their own. We want to be reasonable and balanced. That's all I'm saying, right?
I wholeheartedly agree. Here's a tougher question that we want to try to address on today's GMS Focus. It's not a trend unique to South Korea. Other countries also see a rising trend of politicization of diplomatic issues. For example, could social media, algorithms, and the way we obtain political knowledge be intensifying this trend worldwide, Dr. Kim?
I guess that is a big concern these days, and domestic voices rising and being used as a tool of political fight by both sides in many countries, particularly pluralistic, plural democracy, countries of plural democracy. It's a big concern. Countries like Russia and China, where politics is managed and controlled, it's less of concern, but it could increase the possibility of conflicts among the countries. That is a grave concern as you raised. And we know, for example, this is slightly different from like case that causes international conflicts or conflict between countries, but we know how foreign policy was misused in the case of the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan about 2 years ago, for instance. Biden administration was so mindful of domestic politics and wanted to be on schedule in terms of accomplishing this withdrawal by a certain time with the upcoming midterm election and all that kind of stuff. Later, we learned painfully that was one of the key reasons why the United States failed so gravely in this, withdrawing their troops from Afghanistan, creating so much chaos and tragedy and everything. And we learned throughout their congressional hearings and everything how the government was so only fixated on domestic political concerns and the intelligence community failed on delivering on those concerns and everything. So we're learning from these examples. Korea does not want to repeat the mistake that the United States government has made on their Afghanistan withdrawal, for instance. Domestic politics is domestic politics on one hand, But foreign policy and diplomacy, this is about the national interest that affects everybody, left and right, and all spectrum of political distribution, opinion of distribution. So this. I hope that Korea has learned some lessons and hope that we will make this one as an important lesson going forward.
So, Dr. Kim, then, based on your expertise, what are the consequences of such politicization and greater international conflicts than ever before? Could that be one of the fallouts?
The worldwide greater possibility of conflict between countries is a very, very serious matter indeed, and so that's one thing that we need to be thinking about constantly on a global scale. More domestic scale, one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that as Korea, as a very pluralistic democratic country where we have all these different opinions popping out all the time, and the country being divided between left and right and progressive and conservative and so on, we have to be mindful that we are at great disadvantage in dealing with country on the other side. For instance, country that's controlled by one political party that's in power all the time, and our North Korea in the north. If I were North Korea, if I were China, if I were Russia, I would be very much interested in taking advantage of, in any possible ways, taking advantage of division of politics in South Korea when we face an issue, conflictual issue with South Korea. I would do that if I were North Korea and China or Russia. So that's what we have to be more careful of. More top-down controlled political systems can take great advantage of divided country on the other side. And so that's something we should be all mindful and be careful about, if you will.
And finally, what are some of the things that the Korean public should keep in mind facing this global trend?
My hope is the public opinion leaders and then the commentators should come out more boldly and strongly discouraging Korea's media and Korea's political parties from engaged in using these international diplomatic issues as a material for conflict. When I open a news portal, for instance, on the internet and my mobile phone, clearly this partisan media on both sides, conservative as well as progressive, some of their media headlines are about the conflict with Japan, conflict with China, all this conflict with the United States, and all those things. And throwing accusations to the other side, saying terrible things about what the other side has made a mistake of, and all that kind of stuff. And so I hope going forward, public opinion leaders and the commentators will come out more strongly, discouraging this kind of activities, saying, look, foreign policy, diplomacy, these are issues that affect all of us, regardless of our political differences. And while we want to continue on with whatever political fight we might have at home, let's minimize this externally on foreign policy issues. That's my hope. I don't know how realistic that
is. Regardless of political differences, as difficult as it may be, I think it's important to bring these complex questions forward and highlight the point of media literacy. I can't highlight that enough each day. To be mindful of the information that we're fed, to be mindful of the agenda, it seems that both aisles of the political spectrum are inclined to feed us. I think that makes a more intelligent voter, an intelligent citizen. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you next week. If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.